Here, the highest point on an entire nation is barely the height of a two-story house. Somewhere in the room where you're watching this, someone will outlive their own country. Not metaphorically, literally on a map, gone. This is the Maldives. And before you decide you already know it, before you picture the postcard, the honeymoon suite, the water's so blue it looks retouched, come stand on the ground itself. Because the ground here is the story, all 2.5 meters of it. You've never seen a country measure its future in inches before. You're about to. 1,200 islands, 26 atolls strung across the equator like a broken necklace dropped into the Indian Ocean. Add up every grain of dry land in this country, and you get 298 square kilometers, smaller than the country of Malta, scattered across 90,000 square kilometers of open sea. 99% of this nation is water, 1% is a place to stay. Average elevation 1.5 meters. The highest natural point anywhere in the country, 2.4 meters, the height of a doorframe. No mountains, no rivers, no hills except a scatter of dunes barely taller than a parked car. This is, by every measurement that exists, the lowest country on Earth. And somewhere in the middle of this fragile geometry, 500,000 people live, pressed onto islands you could walk end to end before your coffee gets cold. In a capital where more human beings share 1 square kilometer than almost anywhere else alive. Imagine a nation smaller than most cities, feeding a share of the world's tuna market, drawing more than 1 million visitors a year to resorts most of its own citizens will never set foot on, and hosting, somewhere in its reefs, the largest gathering of manta rays scientists have ever recorded on this planet. All of that, balanced on ground you could lose to a bad afternoon tide. There is a number. A very specific number of years that gets attached to this country in headlines and documentaries, in the quiet worry of people who've never set foot here. Ask 10 people how long the Maldives has left, and you'll get 10 different answers, all delivered with total confidence. By the end of this journey, you'll know exactly where that number comes from. You'll also know something the headlines tend to leave out. Something written into the coral itself, into the sand, into the way an entire people have learned to live on borrowed ground. Stay till the end. The real answer isn't quite what you think. Arrive at Malé the way most of the world does, by air, banking low over water the color of glass, and then suddenly a city. Vertical, dense, impossibly close together, filling every available meter of an island you could circle on foot before your legs start to ache. This is the capital of the Maldives, and this is also, by most careful counts, one of the most densely packed pieces of inhabited land on the planet. More people pressed into this single square kilometer than in almost any comparable patch of Manhattan. Step down onto its streets and the scale collapses further. Motorbikes thread between market stalls close enough to touch. Laundry lines cross 5 stories above alleyways barely wide enough for 2 people to pass. Somewhere, always, the call to prayer rises over the traffic and the harbor noise. A grandmother hangs fish to dry from a 3rd-floor balcony rail, her hands moving without looking, the motion worn smooth by 40 years of repetition. There's a story locals tell about how this place became what it is. Not the crowding, the older story, the one about how the whole nation came to believe what it believes. Long before the mosques, long before the call to prayer, the legend goes, a sea demon named Ranamari rose from these waters each month and demanded a young woman be left alone in a temple by the shore. The mornings after, the story says, she was never found alive. Then a traveling scholar arrived, some accounts say from North Africa, others from Persia, and offered to take her place. He spent the night reciting scripture instead of screaming. By dawn, the demon was gone. The king converted. So tradition says, did everyone else. Historians are careful here. Some call it folklore built to explain a religious shift that likely unfolded over generations, not one single night. What isn't in question is this. Somewhere around 1153, this entire nation turned from one faith to another, and it never turned back. The mosque said to stand on the site of that old temple, the Hulhumalé, its coral stone walls worn soft at the edges, is still there today, a 5-minute walk from the harbor. Ask why 500,000 people keep choosing to squeeze onto a handful of crowded islands when 1,000 empty ones sit within reach. And the honest answer is need, not preference. The hospitals are here. The universities are here. The jobs are here. People didn't come to Malé because it was beautiful. They came because everywhere else, there was simply less. This is Malé, a capital built on the blunt math of too many people and too little land, in a country with almost none to spare. Now leave the crowd behind. A few kilometers north, engineers have started building more of it. Cross the bridge from Malé and the crowding falls away into something that looks, at first glance, like it shouldn't exist at all. Wide streets, straight lines, an entire city built on land that was 30 years ago open lagoon. This is Hulhumalé. Its name means, more or less, New Malé, and it is exactly that, a deliberate answer to a problem with no easy fix. Since 1997, sand has been pumped up from the seafloor here, layer after layer, until a shallow lagoon became 4 square kilometers of new ground, raised 2 meters above sea level, twice the height of the capital it was built to relieve. Walk it at golden hour and the ambition is visible everywhere. Palm-lined boulevards, a public beach with sand trucked in from other islands entirely. Apartment towers rising 25 stories over streets angled deliberately to catch the sea breeze, cutting the electric bill on every air conditioner behind every window. Officials call it a model for climate adaptation, a doorstep, a destination. Population projections put more than 100,000 residents here eventually, a whole second capital, built from nothing but pumped sand and stubbornness. Not everyone who lives here agrees the promise has been fully kept. Ask around and you'll hear a different word more often than pride: dislocation. Many residents were relocated here after the 2004 tsunami, or drawn by housing and jobs that outer islands simply couldn't offer. Interviews with people who've moved describe something quieter than triumph. A city that still doesn't quite feel like home. Culture and belonging still catching up to the concrete. There's a fisherman's daughter, 19 now, who moved here with her parents from a southern atoll 6 years ago. She likes the electricity that doesn't cut out. She misses, she says, knowing every face on her old island by name. Here she knows maybe a dozen faces out of tens of thousands of neighbors. The engineering itself is not in question. This is real land, built to outlast the sea longer than almost anywhere else in the country. What's still being written, one migration at a time, is whether a city built this fast can hold a people's sense of home as securely as it holds back the tide. This is Hulhumalé, proof that when the ground itself becomes negotiable, people will simply build more of it and worry about whether it feels like home later. There's a smell that drifts across that bridge some evenings, coconut and something smoking low over a flame. Follow it back toward the old city. Before you understand how this country protects itself, you should understand how it eats. Enter one of Malé's tea shops around 4 in the afternoon, and you'll find the country's real national monument. Not a statue, not a mosque, but a plate of shredded smoked tuna mixed with grated coconut, onion, and a squeeze of lime, torn apart with warm flatbread instead of a fork. They call it mas huni. Mas means fish, huni means coconut. Together they mean breakfast, though here at Hedika hour, in the unhurried gap between lunch and evening prayer, people eat it as an excuse to sit and talk. The tea shops give this whole ritual its own name. Hedika, small eats. Sweet and savory little dishes that appear on cheap plates and disappear within minutes. Deep-fried gula stuffed with tuna and coconut. Kuli bokiba, spiced fish cakes sliced thin and eaten with the fingers. Sweetened black tea, poured strong enough to cut through the afternoon heat. If mas huni is the dish this country would put on its flag, garudia is the one it turns to when it's tired. Clear tuna broth, barely more than fish, water, and salt, finished at the table with whatever the eater wants. A wedge of lime here, crushed chili there, a spoonful of pungent rihakaru paste stirred in for anyone who wants it darker, saltier, more themselves. There's an etiquette to it outsiders rarely notice at first. Eat with your right hand. Tear the roshi, don't cut it. Wait for the eldest at the table before anyone starts. Watch long enough and you'll see the same small choreography repeat at every table. A grandmother portioning rice for a toddler who isn't watching. A fisherman still smelling faintly of the boat. 3 teenagers arguing about football over one shared plate of bajia. Vegetarian versions exist too, quieter but no less loved. Boshi mashuni, made from banana flour instead of tuna. For the handful of days a household can't or won't eat fish. Nobody eats alone here if they can help it. The meal is the excuse. The company is the entire point of it. This is the table this whole nation gathers around 3 times a day, in 10,000 small variations of the same handful of ingredients. Because when your entire food supply depends on what the sea gives you and what one tree provides, you learn to make abundance out of very little. There's a second table waiting on a different island entirely, one where the rules of what's allowed to happen at it changed completely, block by block. Mafushi looks from the harbor like almost any other local island. Low buildings, a mosque at the center, fishing boats tied along a narrow jetty. Walk 5 minutes toward the water though, and the rules of the country quietly, completely change. On one side of a low fence, village streets where women in headscarves greet each other on their way to afternoon prayers, where a sign asks visitors to keep shoulders and knees covered, where you will not find a single bottle of alcohol in any shop, cafe, or home, because none legally exists here at all. On the other side of that same fence, a stretch of white sand where bikinis are not just tolerated but expected, where a cooler of imported beer sits in plain view, and where none of the rules from the village side apply in the slightest. This is a bikini beach, a designated pocket of tourist zone law stitched directly onto the edge of a devout Muslim community. It didn't always exist. Until 2009, local islands like this one were legally closed to independent tourists altogether. Travelers stayed sealed off on private resort islands, entirely apart from ordinary Maldivian daily life. When the law changed, islands like Mafushi opened their doors and had to invent, almost overnight, a way to host foreign swimwear and foreign alcohol without asking an entire community to abandon its own religious law in the process. The solution is the fence, the sign, the 20 meters of sand that quietly operate under different rules than everywhere else on the island. It works, mostly because everyone agrees to treat the 2 zones as though they belong to different countries. A guest house owner who's run rooms here for 11 years describes it simply. Tourists forget sometimes, he says. We remind them gently. Nobody wants trouble. Nobody wants disrespect either. There's a rhythm to how the island absorbs this daily contradiction. 5 calls to prayer moving through loudspeakers over streets where alcohol is a criminal offense. And 100 meters away, sunburned honeymooners ordering their second round without a second thought. 2 adjacent realities, sharing one small patch of sand, one drinking water supply, one fragile economy. This is Mafushi. Not really a compromise, more a working agreement between an old faith and a new industry, renegotiated one bamboo fence at a time. Not every custom here needs a fence to protect it. Some travel from island to island in nothing but a pair of patient hands and a lifetime of practice. On Hulhumalé in Ba Atoll, the sound that identifies the island before you even see it is a soft, rhythmic slap, palm leaf strands being pulled tight over and over against a low wooden frame. This is where tuna is made, intricately patterned reed mats woven by hand from screw pine leaves dyed in slow-simmered natural colors, a craft found in its finest form almost nowhere else in the country. The claim isn't subtle. Ask any Maldivian where the real mats come from, and this is the island they'll name without hesitating. Inside a workshop that's really just an open-sided shelter, a woman in her 50s sits cross-legged at a loom older than she is. Her fingers moving through a pattern she stopped needing to think about years ago. She started at 9, she says, sitting beside her grandmother the exact same way her own granddaughter now sits beside her. A single fine mat can take weeks. The geometric patterns repeating diamonds, interlocking lines, carry names passed down alongside the technique itself, though what those names originally meant has mostly dissolved into pure inheritance rather than instruction. Down the same narrow street, lacquer artisans work coconut wood into bowls and boxes using a technique layered resin, hand-turned on a foot-powered lathe, polished by rubbing rather than sanding. that hasn't meaningfully changed in generations. Both crafts share the same quiet arithmetic, enormous time invested entirely by hand, for an object built to outlast the person who made it by decades, sometimes centuries. Tourism has found this island too, the way it eventually finds almost everywhere. Buyers pass through now, and some resorts commission pieces directly for their lobbies. The weaver says the money helps, genuinely. She also says, without being asked, that she'd keep working even if nobody ever bought another mat again. Her hands, at this point in her life, would simply have nothing else to do with a quiet afternoon. Some evenings, when a Boduberu drum starts up somewhere near the harbor, the deep, rolling rhythm that traces back distantly to African trade routes centuries old, she'll set the loom down and go listen. The same unhurried patience carrying over from one craft into the other. This is Hulhumalé, proof that some of the most beautiful things a country makes were never built to be fast, only to be exactly right. There's a very different smell waiting a short boat ride away. Less beautiful, just as essential to how this country survives. Long before you reach the small factory on Hulhumalé, you smell it. A thick, briny, unmistakably fermented tang carried on the sea breeze. The kind of smell that makes first-time visitors wrinkle their noses and lifelong locals close their eyes and simply inhale. This is rihakuru, tuna boiled down slowly for hours over a wood fire until the liquid disappears entirely, leaving behind a dark brown paste dense enough to hold a spoon standing upright on its own. To an outsider, it can look and smell like something gone badly wrong. To a Maldivian, it's the difference between a forgettable meal and a genuinely good one. The salty umami backbone stirred into curries, spread thin on flatbread, or eaten straight by the spoonful, mixed through plain rice. Before refrigeration reached these islands, this was survival chemistry disguised as a condiment. Reduce the fish down far enough, concentrate the salt and protein enough, and it keeps for months without spoiling, in a climate that ruins fresh fish within hours of the catch. The paste isn't a delicacy someone invented purely for flavor. It was invented because people needed a way to not go hungry between good fishing days, and it happened to taste extraordinary in the process, the way necessity sometimes does. A man in his 60s tends 3 blackened cauldrons at once, stirring with a paddle worn smooth on one edge, timing each pot by smell and color rather than any clock on the wall. He learned the trade from his father, who learned it from his own father before him. He'll tell you, if you ask, that the best rihakuru takes a patience no machine has ever managed to replace. You cannot rush the reduction without scorching the batch, and a scorched batch is simply worthless. Hours of fire wasted in a single careless minute. The same tourists who wrinkle their noses at the smell are, more often than not, the ones asking to buy a jar to take home by the end of their trip, once somebody finally convinces them to try 1 spoonful stirred through warm rice. This is Hulhumalé, where necessity boiled down slowly enough over enough generations becomes something people are genuinely proud to call their own. Now follow the fishermen out past this smell, past the harbor, into the water where the paste's main ingredient actually comes from in the first place. Out past the reef line of North Malé Atoll, a wooden donie cuts through open water at dawn. Its engine, mechanized only since 1974, the one modern concession on an otherwise centuries-old boat design. On deck, 4 men work in near silence, each holding a single pole and line. No nets, no hooks left unattended, 1 fish pulled aboard at a time. This is pole and line tuna fishing, and it still employs something close to 1/3 of this country's entire workforce, contributing more than 15% of its GDP. An extraordinary share for a method that has barely changed since long before engines existed anywhere on Earth. Old islanders tell a simpler story of how all this came to be, that the atolls were flung down by a great fish shaking sand from its back, or grown from coral seeded deliberately to give sailors somewhere to rest. The real explanation, worked out by geologists more than a century ago, is almost as strange. A volcano rises from the ocean floor. Coral grows in a ring around its shore. Over millions of years, the volcano slowly sinks back beneath the waves, and the coral, growing upward just fast enough to stay near the sunlit surface, is left behind as a ring with nothing left inside it. An atoll is, in the most literal sense, a tombstone for a mountain that drowned so slowly nobody alive was ever around to watch it happen. Back on deck, one of the fishermen, early 30s, sun-weathered well past his years, hauls in his fourth skipjack of the hour with a motion so practiced it barely registers as effort anymore. He'll do this for 6 more hours today. Tomorrow the same. His father did it before him. His son, he says, probably won't. There's better money now in tourism, in the cities, in Hulhumalé's construction boom. He isn't bitter about it. Just matter of fact, the way people learn to be about tides. If you already knew a country this small could still feed a global tuna market one pole and one line at a time, tell me in the comments below. Most people, even people who've been here on holiday, genuinely don't. This is the water this whole nation was quietly built from. Coral growing over a drowning mountain. Fish pulled up one by men who inherited the method, along with the weight of doing it their whole lives. Now the water itself is about to do something that looks a lot less like fishing and a lot more like magic. There is a bay in Ba Atoll, barely the size of a football field, where, for a few months of the year, more manta rays gather in one place than anywhere else scientists have ever documented on Earth. Honeymoon Bay is shaped like a funnel, a narrow channel opening into a shallow lagoon. And during the southwest monsoon, from roughly May through November, the geometry becomes a trap for something other than water. Tidal currents push plankton-rich water in from the open ocean. The falling tide can't fully drain it back out before the next surge arrives. And the plankton concentrates, layer after layer, until the bay becomes, for a few hours, one of the richest feeding grounds left in the ocean. That's when they arrive. Reef manta rays, wingspans stretching past 4 meters, sometimes joined by whale sharks passing through the same plankton bloom. When the concentration peaks, something researchers call a manta cyclone begins. Dozens of rays circling nose to tail in a slow, deliberate spiral. Mouths open, funneling the soup of plankton directly into rows of feeding gills. From above, snorkelers describe it as watching a single vast organism breathe. It wasn't always protected like this. Local fishermen once knew this bay for a very different reason. Reliable hunting ground for whale sharks, valuable then for their meat and oil. When the diving world discovered Honeymoon in the 1990s, boat traffic exploded almost as fast as awareness did. And the bay came dangerously close to being loved to death before anyone properly protected it. In 2009, the government finally stepped in. By 2011, the entire atoll had UNESCO biosphere status. Today, no more than 80 visitors and 5 boats are permitted in the water at once. A hard limit, strictly enforced, on how much of this wonder any single day is allowed to share with the world. A former fisherman who once hunted these same waters now works as a marine ranger here, radio clipped to his vest, counting boats instead of counting catches. He doesn't talk about the shift as a loss. He talks about it as the same ocean, simply paying him a different way now. This is Honeymoon, proof that some of the most extraordinary things left on this planet only survive because somebody somewhere decided deliberately to stop taking them. All of this, the timing, the tides, the feast itself, is dictated entirely by a season with its own name and its own particular temperament. There is no mountain range here to name a wind after, no valley to funnel a storm into legend. And yet this country runs on 2 seasons so distinct that people plan marriages, harvests, and fishing trips almost entirely around which one currently holds the sky. Iruvai, the northeast monsoon, brings calm seas and dry air from roughly December through March. The season resorts market as paradise, honestly the one that deserves the photographs. Hulhumalé, the southwest monsoon, arrives from late April through October carrying real weight, stronger winds, rougher seas, and rain that can fall 3 meters deep across a single year in the south of the country alone. The mechanism behind it is bigger than the Maldives itself. Every spring, the vast landmass of South Asia heats up far faster than the ocean surrounding it, dragging in moisture-laden air from across the Indian Ocean to fill the resulting pressure gap. The Maldives simply sits directly in the path of that enormous seasonal breath, far too small to influence it, entirely shaped by it instead. In May of 1991, that seasonal wait turned genuinely violent. Monsoon winds whipped up tidal surges that damaged thousands of homes and piers, salted arable land, and uprooted fruit trees across multiple atolls in a single storm. A reminder, still repeated by people old enough to have lived through it, that rainy season here can mean something far closer to a test than a forecast. Ask a fisherman which season he prefers and he won't hesitate for a second. Uruvai, always, for the calm water and the predictable catch. But it's Hulhumalé, the harder season that feeds Hanafaru Bay, that fills the wells, that keeps the coconut palms fruiting through the dry months that follow it. There's a saying older fishermen still repeat to anyone who complains too loudly about the rain. The hard season is the one quietly paying for the easy one. Every April, before the wind turns, the same ritual repeats itself across 100 islands at once. Roofs get checked, boats get hauled up and recalked, loose zinc sheeting gets nailed down twice instead of once. Nobody calls it storm preparation. They just call it April. This is the weather this entire nation negotiates with, twice a year, every year. Not something that simply happens to this country, so much as something it has learned, over centuries, to live inside of. There's one more island waiting where the water plays by an entirely different set of rules. Sharing its space with a predator most countries would rather avoid than advertise proudly. There is one island in this entire archipelago that doesn't behave like an atoll at all. No lagoon, no ring of scattered islands. Just a single landmass rising alone out of open ocean, sitting almost exactly on the equator. Hulhumalé looks from above like a mistake in the pattern. Underwater, it's something closer to a miracle. This is the only place in the Maldives, arguably one of very few places on Earth, where divers are guaranteed to see tiger sharks every single day, year-round. Local operators have identified and cataloged more than 200 individual sharks here, the largest known population of its kind anywhere on the planet. No cage, no feeding, just a horseshoe-shaped underwater plateau, 10 meters down, a short boat ride from the harbor, where these animals simply choose to be. For years, tiger sharks carried one reputation worldwide: indiscriminate, dangerous, best avoided at almost any cost. Here, divers who've logged hundreds of hours beside them describe something closer to curiosity than menace. Animals gliding past at arm's length, unhurried, entirely uninterested in the humans quietly watching them breathe. Then the science caught up with what local divers already suspected. Researchers using submersible ultrasound recently confirmed something remarkable. More than 2/3 of the female tiger sharks scanned at Hulhumalé were pregnant. This isn't merely a shark hotspot. It may be one of the only confirmed gestational grounds for this species anywhere in the Indian Ocean. A nursery hiding in plain sight, off the coast of an island most of the world has never once heard of. The island above water is its own kind of anomaly, a volcanic soil rare anywhere else in this coral nation. Freshwater lakes where none should geologically exist. Breadfruit trees growing taller than anywhere else in the country. Locals sometimes call it the Maldivian Galapagos, and mean it literally, an island that plays by different rules above the water and below it, all at once. Since 2010, hunting any shark anywhere in Maldivian waters has been illegal. The entire country declared a shark sanctuary in a single legislative act. Hulhumalé barely needed convincing. Its economy had already quietly discovered that a live tiger shark, visited by divers for decades on end, is worth considerably more than a dead one ever was. This is Hulhumalé, an island that broke the geographic pattern of an entire nation, and in doing so, became the place where that nation's most feared predator quietly, secretly keeps having children. There's a smaller island south of here holding an entirely different kind of record. One this whole journey has been circling since its opening minute. On the southwestern coast of Hulhumalé in Adu Atoll, there's a modest rise of sand dunes that most visitors walk straight past without noticing anything unusual at all. This is Vilangili, or more precisely, the ground beneath your feet right here, right now, is the highest natural point in the entire Republic of Maldives. 2.4 meters, just under 8 feet. Books and travel guides deliberately don't publish its exact coordinates. There's a quiet local insistence that this record shouldn't become a photo op stampede, so finding it, for the rare visitor determined enough to stand on the roof of the lowest country on Earth takes a GPS unit, an altimeter, and a few hints from someone who actually lives here. This is the number, more or less, that opened this whole journey. The number the headlines always reach for. A nation that might not survive the century, measured out by a single doorframe of elevation standing between 500,000 people and the open sea. Except the story doesn't end quite where the headlines usually stop it. In 2020, a 3-year study out of the University of Plymouth examined this exact question across the Maldives and the Marshall Islands and found something the doom-driven forecasts hadn't fully accounted for. Tides naturally move sediment onto low coral islands, and in the right conditions, that process can raise an island's elevation right along with the rising sea. A kind of geological self-defense mechanism. Reefs quietly rebuilding the ground beneath the people living on top of them. It isn't a guarantee. The same researchers warn that seawalls, built specifically to protect islands, can actually block this natural rebuilding process, locking a place into a fight it has no real chance of winning on its own, which is, in its own way, the entire point. This isn't a country simply drowning on a fixed, predictable schedule. It's a country in an active, ongoing negotiation with the very ocean that made it. One that could still go either way. There's a word for what that feels like. Living somewhere between a guaranteed ending and a genuine fighting chance. Ask 10 Maldivians and you'll get 10 different words for it, in a language spoken almost nowhere else on Earth. None of them translate cleanly into English. Maybe they shouldn't have to. This is the highest point on Earth's lowest nation, proof that the number everyone quotes is real, and also somehow not quite the whole truth. There's one more kind of light waiting in this country. Not from the sky this time, from the water itself. After dark on the shore of Boduberu Island in Ra Atoll, the ocean does something that looks on first sight genuinely impossible. It glows. Not reflected light, not a trick of the moon. The water itself, lit from within, blue and electric, tracing the exact shape of every wave as it breaks against the sand. Locals have their own explanations, older than marine biology, sea spirits, drowned stars. The ocean quietly remembering light it once borrowed from the sky. The real mechanism is almost as strange. Microscopic phytoplankton called dinoflagellates disturbed by motion. A wave, a footstep, a hand dragged slowly through the shallows. Release a burst of chemical light as a defense mechanism, meant to startle away whatever just touched them. Multiply that single flash by billions of organisms crowding the same stretch of water, and the entire shoreline appears to catch fire in blue. Walk to the water's edge on a moonless night, and the effect only intensifies with every step. A footprint left in wet sand keeps glowing faintly after the foot has already lifted away. A hand pulled slowly through the shallows leaves a trail like a sparkler dragged through dark air. The glow tends to peak during the warmer months, late summer into autumn, when the plankton bloom thickens, though nobody can promise it on any given night, which is exactly why islanders never quite stop checking. Local fishermen have used this for generations, timing certain night trips to when the glow runs strongest, reading the light itself to tell which way the fish are moving beneath the surface. There's a stretch of beach past the last guest house where the village lights don't quite reach anymore. The only sound there is the tide, pulling back over broken coral with a small, dry rattle. Somewhere further off, a screen door closes. Nothing else, just water glowing faintly at the ankles, going dark again the instant it stops moving. Nobody who witnesses this for the first time reaches for the correct scientific vocabulary in the moment it's actually happening. Mostly people just go quiet. This is Boduberu. The closest this country comes to proving that even its water hasn't finished surprising the people who've lived beside it their entire lives. There's one more stop left, not really a place. A moment, the one this entire country pointed to once to make the rest of the world finally listen. On October the 17th, 2009, in a shallow lagoon a short boat ride from Malé, the president of the Maldives called his cabinet to order. Everyone was in full scuba gear. The conference table was bolted to the seafloor. Ministers communicated with hand signals and waterproof whiteboards instead of raised voices, and at the end of the meeting, they signed a document calling for global action on climate change underwater entirely on purpose, because a president named Mohammed Nasheed wanted the image itself to become the argument. It worked in the way images sometimes do better than statistics ever manage to. The photograph of a cabinet meeting held entirely beneath the waves traveled further and faster than any climate report this country had ever produced on paper. 3 years later, Nasheed said publicly what he'd already been implying underwater all along. If carbon emissions kept climbing at their current rate, he warned, his country could be gone within his own lifetime. That warning is now more than a decade old. The Maldives is still here. Hulhumalé keeps rising meter by reclaimed meter. Vilangili's 2.4 meters of elevation haven't changed, and neither really has the ocean's patience. Somewhere in this country right now, a fisherman is heading out at dawn with a single pole and a line, the same way his father did. In a nation that both the headlines and the tide keep insisting won't be here much longer, and that keeps stubbornly, complicatedly, continuing to exist anyway. Divers who visited that lagoon, since say the weighted flag, the ministers anchored to the reef floor that day is still down there somewhere, half buried in sand nobody's ever bothered to dig it back out from. Nobody seems entirely sure where anymore. Nobody's gone looking very hard for it either. There's no tidy ending to hand you here, no verdict on whether the tide wins or the coral does, whether Hulhumalé's 50-year bet on reclaimed land pays off, whether the number attached to this country's future turns out to be real or badly overestimated. What's certain is only this: a people who could have simply left chose instead to keep building, keep weaving, keep pulling tuna up one line at a time, on ground that might not exist for their grandchildren the exact way it existed for their grandparents. This is the Maldives, not really a countdown so much as an argument still being actively made. One reclaimed meter and one woven mat and one line-caught fish at a time, about what a place is genuinely worth fighting to keep. Pull every one of these threads together, and one truth sits quietly underneath all of it. This was never really a story about disappearing. It only looks that way from a distance, from a headline, from 2.4 meters of elevation, reduced to a single frightening statistic on a page. Up close, it's a story about adaptation practiced so continuously it no longer registers as heroic to the people actually doing it. A capital that squeezed 500,000 lives onto a handful of crowded islands rather than scatter and slowly lose each other. An artificial city built meter by pumped meter because waiting for a perfect solution was never actually going to be one. A weaver who'd keep working the loom even if the money stopped arriving tomorrow. A fisherman who knows his son probably won't inherit the trade and has made a kind of peace with that the way people make peace with tides. Not because it doesn't matter to him, but because railing against it has never once changed when the water comes in anyway. The mantas still return to Honeymoon Bay every monsoon, funneling plankton into a feeding frenzy scientists still don't fully understand even now. The tiger sharks of Hulhumalé are still quietly having children in water most of the world will never see with their own eyes. The sea off Boduberu still glows at the ankles of anyone willing to walk out after dark and wait. None of that is going anywhere on any headline schedule. What this country has built across its full and layered history is not a monument to its own ending. It's a working theory about what people do when the ground itself becomes a negotiation instead of a guarantee. You build higher, you weave finer, you fish smarter, you sign your climate warnings underwater if that's genuinely what it takes to be heard, and you keep living in full color on the ground you have left for exactly as long as it lasts you. There's a question worth sitting with after a place like this. If you knew with real certainty exactly how much time you had left somewhere you loved, would you spend it differently? Would you build more or slower, love harder or more carefully? Most of us never get an honest answer to that question. The Maldives, in its own complicated, contested, still unresolved way, might be the closest thing on earth to a country forced to actually answer it out loud. Maybe that's the real reason this place unsettles people more than the postcards ever let on. It isn't the beauty. Plenty of places have beauty. It's the quiet math running underneath the beauty, the 2.5 meters of elevation, standing between an entire culture in the open sea, and the fact that its people have chosen so far to keep dancing at Boduberu festivals and weaving mats and boiling tuna into paste and pulling fish up one line at a time, instead of simply mourning in advance for a loss that hasn't happened yet, and, according to some of the very same scientists sounding the alarm, might not have to happen at all. You came here probably for the water, the color of it, the impossible clarity, the honeymoon brochure blue that made this country famous in the first place. What you're leaving with, if this journey did its job properly, is something closer to respect. For a people who've turned survival itself into a kind of quiet, ongoing art form, one reclaimed island and one woven mat at a time. Thank you for spending this time here, on ground that might not exist for as long as any of us would like, with people who've decided that's not a reason to stop living fully on it right now. If this place surprised you, if you walked in expecting only a resort brochure and walked out with something heavier and more alive, let me know in the comments below. There's always another journey waiting somewhere. I'll see you on the next one.